All right. Peace and greetings, YouTubers. So welcome to another edition of In the News. You know what? I'm not even going to lie. I'm a little salty. Just a little bitter. There were 7 concerts I was supposed to see this summer. And there was a certain show I was supposed to see this past week. And I was ready to because I had a seat at the front. I was going to be close enough to feel the heat from the pyrotechnics and the explosions. I was going to be close enough to choke on the fog from the stage and be blinded from the strobe lights and the lasers. I was ready. Like, the nation was going to be rhythming. The munches were going to be missing. You know, I was ready to jump when she would get to Together Again. Because if you've ever seen Janet, you know, you got to participate when you go to her show. It's a whole cardio workout. Like, when she does Together Again for them 3 minutes, she wants the whole crowd to jump. And don't be one of the people not jumping, because she will call you out. She and you, okay. Like, that's the one time Janet is not soft-spoken. So I was ready. It was going to be lit. But you know what? It is what it is. Plus, she's been touring every year since 2017 anyway. But just like I said in the live video, one of the cool things that will happen in relation to all of these different concerts that have been postponed or canceled or rescheduled is that I think it gives all of these artists an opportunity to go back to the drawing board and be even more creative than they've already been. I think a lot of time off kind of creates a whole new realm of being eager and hungry to really get back out there. So I think around 2022, because I don't really know what the concert scene is going to be like in 2021. I think by 2022, you're going to see some really, really dope shows from a lot of the artists who've had to cancel or postpone or reschedule their tours. So, you know, it all balances out. But the one thing I won't complain about is I was very grateful for all of the refunds that came to my bank account from all of these shows. I was like, let me put this right back in the savings. So it is what it is. And then the Entanglement crew. Will Smith, August Alsina, Jada Pinkett. Look, all I'll say is that ain't my life. That's all I know. That's not my life. That's all I got. Pretty much when it comes to relationships, if there is any kind of marriage anywhere within the vicinity and you have not seen the divorce papers signed, sealed, and delivered by both parties and then agreed upon, cemented, and now coming into fruition as reality, do not engage in that relationship because you will get your feelings hurt 9 times out of 10. That's pretty much what it seems like happened. I think for August Alsina, he was under the impression that he and Jada had a bit more than what Jada saw. And I think that's a hurt that kind of sucks too, when you think you're in a relationship and then the other person's like, nah, that ain't what this is. And I'm like, did y'all have a what are we conversation? You know, did y'all have a what's next for us conversation or what? You know what I mean? Because pretty much for August, when he did the interview that pretty much shook the table for everybody the last 2 weeks, you know, he pretty much said that at the time he was down in life because, you know, he's dealt with a lot. You know, his parents have died, his sister died, he's raising the kids, he has a condition he's dealing with, he was almost blind. He has the depression going on. Like, there's a lot going on with him. And he was saying, like, Jada was God sent. She came at the right time. And he really felt that they created a really special bond and something unique that was, you know, pretty much for the two of them. And then on the flip side, when they go to the Red Table Talk with Will and Jada, she was like, oh, it was an entanglement. I was like, dang, that hurts. That's a hurt when you think you're in a relationship with somebody and you're not, because they don't see it that way. Like, man, my feelings would have been hurt on that one. And I think sometimes it's better to be upfront from the beginning. Even if that information is going to hurt or what it is that you're saying to the person will hurt, it's better to be upfront and go ahead and give the harsh truth right off the bat rather than string somebody along and keep dragging them along and giving them tiny little tidbits of hope that there will be something more, but it never comes into that. You know, I think that can be a lot. I don't know if that's what happened with Jada in August, but just in reality, like, man, that's wild. But again, you know, I think sometimes with celebrities too, like, some of these are status relationships in my opinion. Like Will and Jada, even as I was watching, and at the very end, you know, when they did the whole, like, you know, bad marriage for life and the jokes and everything, something still didn't really feel as if they had really made their peace with everything that had happened. For me, it seemed like it was more so, we're protecting the brand. You know, we're really good with the diplomacy and the PR because we're celebrities and that's what we do. And yeah, they've been together for like 25 years, but I think they still have some other stuff maybe that they're working out. I don't live in their house. It's not my business, but I just think with a lot of celebrities, a lot of them stay in relationships because it's status. You know, it's more beneficial to stay in that relationship because it plays a role into everything from movies coming out, everything from tour endorsements, albums being released. All of that plays a role. Like, relationships can make or break some celebrities as far as how the public sees them. I think that's one of the things that kind of may have even happened with somebody like Usher when he married Tamika, and you kind of saw how his celebrity repurposed after that marriage. I'm not saying anything was wrong with the marriage, but I think the general public responded to Usher differently afterwards. But, you know, it is what it is. But I do think with Will and Jada, you know, I would like to see everybody leave out of that situation happy. But I think sometimes, again, when it comes to relationships, especially if it's somebody who's getting into some kind of situation or entanglement with somebody who's married, a lot of times that married person no matter how miserable they may be in that marriage or whatever's happening, if that marriage has a strong enough foundation, they're willing to stay within the lane of crazy for that marriage, because at least that kind of crazy that they're engaging in is a crazy that they understand, and it's a crazy that's routine, and it's a crazy that's their norm. And they're willing to go through that lane and that phase of craziness with that person because the two of them already understand each other's crazy, if that makes any sense. And so you pretty much become built for each other for some people. And so I think that's why a lot of people will choose to stay in whatever relationship they have going on. And so for August, I'm like, hopefully everything works out with him, but I think he's definitely hurt in all of that. But that's really all I have on it. But really, if you want to really talk about it, the beef I have with Red Table Talk, for some reason, Jada always says, I don't know if somebody told Jada that as long as you talk very soft and slow, it will just make everything sound so profound. Because I could never get into Red Table Talk. My coworker used to watch it all the time during the lunch break. And all I would ever hear was like, I would, you over there watching. Then I go over there and watch, and then they'd be saying something crazy like, and then I learned that Tuesday comes after Monday. And then the people at the table, yes. And then, Tuesday comes after Monday because the days are chronological. But when I think of chronological days, it's not about numbers. It's about time. When we talk chronological, we're speaking of the element of time and progression, because just like how I said Tuesday comes after Monday, I said that 45 seconds ago, that is no longer the now, it is the past, it is now today. And then everybody at the table, and so that's why when we're living in the now, we must prepare for the future, because it is our past that will build what it is we're doing today as we prep for the future, which will reflect the decisions of our past. And then everybody at the table, and I'm like, what did I just watch? So I'm like, Jade, I'm going to have my own show. I'm going to have the Black Couch Conversation. If they can do Red Table Talk, I'm going to have the Black Couch Conversation. My couch is actually brown, but I'm going to get a black one. Because, Red Table Talk, I guess. But, it's interesting to see. Like I said, I don't live in their house, so they do what they want to do. I just wonder how did dinner go? Like, was everybody living in the house together? So it was like Will on one side, and I'm sure Will probably had somebody on the side too. Like, was Will in his piece doing something, and then August and Jada would come together and they all eat dinner together. Like, oh, who made the mashed potatoes? Oh, actually, this is how we make it in New Orleans. Oh, this is how I used to make it in Philly. Oh, I'm gonna have to get that recipe from you, bro. All right, cool. I don't know. Interesting. Anyway, moving on. And then Queiro, hopefully I said the name right, because y'all know I stay jacking up somebody's name on this channel. He's been catching a bunch of smoke in response to some of the statements that he's recently said about Jill Scott. So he released a series of tweets. Some of them include, people are attracted to Jill Scott. And he said, okay, so it's an energy thing. Got it. And by no means is she ugly, but y'all really sexually aroused by her, huh? And he kept asking some additional questions. And of course, people respond and pretty much start chewing him out. So he apologizes and he says, okay, well, she wasn't from my era. I didn't know. I apologize. He apologizes for the aspect of the optics not looking good as far as a black man tearing down a black woman in the looks department on a social media platform that millions of people use every day. He pretty much, he apologized. He took the L. He said he learned from this. But really, the question I had was, what was the end goal supposed to be with those tweets? Were you expecting everybody to jump on and say, oh, hell nah, she don't look good. She's this, she's that. Like, I don't know what the goal would have been. You know what I mean? Like, I understand if she's not your cup of tea, but what was the purpose of going on a platform, especially when you're a public figure who has a large following, and then putting something like that out? Like, what do you want to happen? You wanted the waves of people to really go and agree with you that you don't think that Jill Scott, I guess, is sexy or attractive, and then you wanted thousands of people to also agree. Like, what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand the purpose of what that was supposed to do. And then it just kind of goes back to me questioning some of the antics that people have, especially when it comes to their personality. It's almost like when people... Have you ever seen when, I don't know, there's a couple that posts a picture of themselves on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and maybe somebody doesn't think that one of the people in the relationship looks good, or they don't think they're attractive, and so they make a post like, dang, even they're in a relationship and I can't get a text back, or even, they done pull somebody, why I can't? I'm like, well, dang, maybe if your personality wasn't trash, you could pull somebody. Don't be hating because they found theirs, let them have their happiness. I don't know. I think also it plays a role into just, some people have some very interesting standards when it comes to what they think is beauty or what they think is sexy. Some people have a very limited scope where the scope is only this wide, and then there's others who they down for any and everything. And so I think a lot of times people really kind of mirror or measure the standards of sexy or attractive to the average 22, 23-year-old pop star or actress. That's pretty much what I think a lot of people tend to do. And I'm like, you limiting the opportunity and the options. You messing yourself up. You missing out. But I don't know. I always think it's tacky when people go after looks. And pretty much my opinion on all of this kind of ties back to what I said in the video where we had the conversation about Ari Lennox and how the dude was talking about how she looked like a pit bull. And we had this whole conversation about standards of beauty and how it relates to femininity in response to how black women are perceived by the masses. Like, we've already had that conversation, so you can check that video out if you want my 2 cents on that. But I just always think it's tacky to go after people when it comes for looks. Because the thing is, I try to not talk about people's looks, because in reality, all it takes is one car accident, and then you're an infomercial at 3 a.m, and your face is all disfigured and everything else, and you people trying to raise money for you. So, like, anything can happen in life, which is why I'm like, I try not to go after people in the looks department. But Jill Scott, I think Jill Scott is gorgeous. And the thing with Jill Scott is, like, Jill Scott still looks exactly the same. She has like that Queen Latifah syndrome where they just don't age. Like, you look at any picture of Queen Latifah from 20 years ago and measure it up to a picture from yesterday, it's the same. I'm like, did you age at all? Like, there's some people who just get that, they got those great genes. They don't age. I think Mary J. Blige is another who's just always looked the same to me. Like, I think she looks a little bit more distinguished now, but like Mary still looks exactly like she did back in the day. And I think Jill Scott, same thing. 20 years ago, Jill is still Jilly from Philly. And I think it's a cop-out to say, well, I didn't grow up on Jill, or she's not from my era. Because in reality, like, I didn't grow up on Pam Grier, but I knew what was up. I didn't grow up in the era of Coffee and all those movies, but I knew about Pam Grier, even if that wasn't my era. So, I don't get what the point was. And to be honest, again, like, sir, you're a football player. Your job is to get knocked upside the head every day for a few years. And no disrespect, some of these boxers and NFL players, by the time they retire, they don't even look the same. You'd be like, what happened? Is it going to go down? Is it the swelling or what? Like, oh, okay, all right, more power to you. All right, your words are a little slurred, but okay. So it's kind of like, come on, leave Jill alone. And I think Jill responded in the most pleasant way, because Jill, she ain't got time for that. Like, Jill is already somebody who brings peace and serenity to people. Like, I'm still in awe from the verses that she and Erykah Badu had. Because, by the time that thing ended, I was just like the Red Table Talk by the time they're done. I was so tranquil and at peace by the time that verses went off, because that was really when like COVID-19 was really doing some crazy numbers and folks were losing their minds a little bit. I needed that day, I ain't gonna lie. And so yeah, leave Jill alone, man. What are you doing? But like I was saying, I'm not really a fan of going after people because of their looks. And even if there's somebody who I don't deem as attractive, I'm not gonna use this platform to let everybody know why I think that. Unless it's something where they have an ugly personality that I'm not attracted to and I want to call that out. But the physical, that's not anything anybody can change. Leave it alone. And like I said, no matter how good you may think you look to somebody, there's going to be somebody else who thinks you're ugly anyway. Like, I'm sure there's a few people on here who look at me sideways and think I look like a bug or something. But look at me being cocky. I'm sure there's a few, just a few. But, leave folks alone. I think that's why people have insecurities and stuff now, because folks harp on the flaws in others and then try to use that to base the value that they have for that person. That's some messed up stuff. So do better, Kyle. You know better than that. Come on, man. Anyway, get your priorities together. Anyway, one of the things that I think is pretty cool is that Nick News is making a return. If you remember, Nick News was a segment that would air on Nickelodeon for kids, where they would pretty much inform the kids about what was happening in the world. And the way that it was always presented in a way where the information would be relayed, but it wouldn't leave kids in fear about what was happening in the world. It would give them enough information to know what was happening and give them their own lane to kind of form their own opinions about everything. And I remember it was hosted by this lady, Linda... I can't remember the last name. I was about to say Linda Feinstein, but no, that's the Central Park 5 lady. But no, I remember it was this woman named Linda, and I used to watch it as a kid. I always thought it was something cool because I knew it was supposed to be for the teenagers, and I was 6 or 7 or maybe 8. And, I think little kids are always obsessed with wanting to hang with the older kids because the older kids are always just so cool. And so I would watch Nick News just because I wanted to be like in the know, because it would come on sometimes during SNCC. And I think it sometimes came on in the weekend too. But I think it's a really dope idea, especially with everything happening in the world. I think sometimes with kids, as parents and educators, sometimes we're so afraid of exposing them to too much that sometimes I think we shelter kids sometimes from everything. And then as they get older and they get into the world, and they, sometimes I feel like some kids end up in just shock with everything that's really happening. And so I think like Nick News was a great outlet as far as kind of introducing different things to the world. I remember being a kid and kind of being a little bit in the know about what was happening in Bosnia, or, what was happening in relation to TWA Flight 800, stuff like that. And it was presented in a way where, again, it wasn't too much for kids. It was just enough for them to understand it and have their own opinions. So I think that's a really dope thing. And the way that it's going to be set up is they're going to have different celebrities hosting the episodes, which again, I think also works. I don't think you can do something like a Linda, I can't think of her last name, in this era, because I think with the new set of up-and-coming kids, they're very into what's now, what's hot, what's popular. You know, when I was a kid, you had Linda, who was like a much older woman who kind of came off like the librarian, you know, doing news segments. I don't know if that quite works today with this generation, because now we're living in the era where everything is instant. People want the quick self-gratification. It has to kind of fit within the mold of what's hot and what's jumping and what's popular. And I think with kids, even though you guys know how I feel sometimes about celebrities being, you know, sometimes overly involved in politics and world affairs, because sometimes they don't have the range to carry the conversations. But I do think in this aspect, I think it kind of fits with what's happening, I guess. It also makes me think back to Channel 1. Did you guys have that in school? I don't know if it still comes on anymore, but I remember Channel 1 was a thing where, I don't know, maybe it was 7 or 8 minute segments that would come on, and it would pretty much cover a few topics, maybe one global issue, 2 things happening in the United States. They'd have a trivia question, and they would play all the latest songs that were on, you know, the radio or TRL or 106 in Park. I remember watching Channel 1, and if you missed the Super Bowl that year, they also premiered like the Britney Spears, the Pepsi commercial, the first one she did. I remember watching that in like 7th grade in class. And so I always thought Channel 1 was cool too, because it pretty much was just like Nick News. And I think for me, like in middle school, we watched it in first period. So like that's how we would start the day. Our teacher, I guess Mr. Holdaway, he thought like, okay, rather than trying to have y'all go right into world history because y'all just got off the buses or just came from breakfast or whatever y'all did, let me give y'all a few minutes to, and then we'll start. So go ahead and watch this, and boom. And I remember Channel 1 even did like a mock presidential election for the 2000 election where the kids got to actually vote. And so it was a way to kind of keep everybody in the know with everything and make, I guess, the youth feel that they still do have a voice with everything happening. One of the things that I think sucks about being a youth in America right now is that the youth are collateral to all of the foolish decisions of the adults. You know what I mean? Like the youth always have to be collateral to everything adults do. And so I think it's important to make sure that youth also still have a voice and still also recognize that, you know, their opinion is going to matter later down the line, even to me, it matters now. But I think as far as them having any kind of like political power or, you know, the positions and stuff that they will later take when it comes to them getting their jobs or becoming, you know, college students or whatever it is that they do in life, like eventually you're going to play a larger role within how society operates. So it's important that I think kids know what's happening in the world. And so I definitely support that. Then when I started thinking about Nick News, you know, the other thing I started thinking about, which this is totally unrelated. Remember The Big Help? I don't know if that's still a thing, but I remember like The Big Help on Nickelodeon. That used to be lit when I was like 7 or 8. Like I remember they would have like the day where they wouldn't even air any shows. It would only be like The Big Help all day on Saturday or something. And they'd be airing at the Nickelodeon studios they used to have in Orlando. And you'd see all of the cast of all that and Kenan and Kel and all these different celebrities. And it just looked like it was so much fun. And, you know, Whoopi Goldberg or somebody be out there. And they got the DJ and the kids are eating ice cream and picking up trash and stuff. And I used to be like, dang, Mom, I want to go to The Big Help. I want to do The Big Help. And my mom used to be like, good. Go upstairs and clean that bathroom and dump them trash cans. You need to clean that room. And when you're done, you need to vacuum. I'm like, Mom, that's not The Big Help. She's like, it is The Big Help, Michael. I was on the phone with Nickelodeon. That's what they said you need to do. And then you need to go pick up that trash that was in front that you left from that popsicle that you got from the ice cream truck. And I used to be like, dang, man, like, ruining your whole childhood. Anyway, and then there's Lady Antebellum. I know we're playing catch up on some of these stories. Don't judge me. I was living my life, okay? But anyway, so there's Lady Antebellum, and back in June, they decided that they wanted to stand in solidarity in relation to everything that was happening in the United States when it comes to police brutality, conversations around race, and even the divide politically that exists at the moment. And so they decided that they were going to drop the name Antebellum from their name because for some people it comes off as offensive because it refers to a time where a lot of people celebrated what was happening in the South as far as the oppressions of slavery and everything that happened between, we want to say, maybe 1830 to about 1860. That's kind of the antebellum period. And so they decided we're going to drop that part. We're going to go by the name Lady A. The problem was there was already another artist from Seattle, a black woman, who also went by the artist name Lady A, a blues singer by the name of Anita White. And so they get into, you know, some negotiations and some conversations trying to figure out where to meet in the middle. The negotiations pretty much just don't go very well. Pretty much Anita White was saying, in order for you guys to pretty much get that name, y'all gonna have to pay me pretty much. Because by you guys having the same name as me, it's gonna take money out of my pocket. And in addition to that, she also wanted some of the proceeds that would have come from that payment to also go to a few charities that she supports as well. Long story short, that didn't go too well. So Lady Antebellum decided they were actually going to sue. And so with the lawsuit, Lady Antebellum is claiming that they're solely suing for the right to peacefully exist with both acts having the same name, Lady A. They're saying they don't want to take any money from her pocket. They don't want her to have to change her name. They just want to be able to exist together and both have the same name, Lady A. However, Anita White's argument is saying that with both acts having the same name, it's going to take money out of her pocket because, again, she recognizes that Lady Antebellum is this giant country group that's won all kind of Grammys and everything. And what's going to happen is that in events where both acts are in the same kind of internet portal or anything like that, when you're talking even like a Google search, you're not going to really see her name. You're going to see the larger group. Right now, you'd see her name because the story is kind of circulating. But fast forward 8 months from now, you're really going to just see the initial group. And so now there's the lawsuit. So, of course, Lady Antebellum has been catching a bunch of backlash. And so for me, the thing is, one, optics. The optics just don't look good. If you're going to stand in solidarity, and I understand, wanting to do better, and that's one of the conversations that comes with allyship or being an ally. Sometimes you have to listen and also think of the optics. We understand that you wanted to do better, but now look how this has turned out. Now, with you trying to do the action that you wanted to do, now it's infringed upon somebody else. And not only that, now you're also suing them. It doesn't look good. At this point, you could have just kept the name Lady Antebellum because now you're playing the role. You know what I mean? And I think she has a very valid point as far as, her brand and everything else kind of living in the shadow of what they already have going. Because one, they're already more established. And when you already have the conversation about how black women are already treated in the music industry, actually black folks in general, but with this conversation, when you think of how many black artists either get their sound stolen, their name stolen, their trademark stolen, what it is that they do as far as how they present their shows stolen, the royalties stolen, the payout, like so many things. So there's so many loopholes in the music industry, especially coming out of like the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, even into the 80s. I say it still happened in the 90s and in the present, but back then it was like so many black artists already got exploited, and there's a reason why you see so many artists who were legends in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so many of them died broke, or so many of them are broke now, mainly because the industry pretty much exploited them. And so really this lawsuit is a conversation around trademarks and just rights to the usage of the name. And I think Anita White has a very valid point as far as Lady Antebellum's already established. And I think with Lady Antebellum, they can literally change their name to anything. It's not going to affect their brand. Their fan base is not going to go anywhere. With country music, country fans are actually pretty loyal. I've never really seen any country acts just lose all of their fans overnight, aside from maybe the Dixie Chicks. And that was more of a political argument. And I also see the contradictions in that as well, because I'm like, for all of the ones who were like, oh, you never go against the president, they didn't have that energy after 2009 for the follow-up president. They were quiet, real quiet then. I was like, okay. I see how we see where y'all stand. But again, like Lady Antebellum, I think because they're still currently in their peak, and they're still currently a staple in country music, like they could change their name to anything. No one was going to jump ship. And like a perfect example, like when you're talking trademarks, is like even when you look at like the Jackson 5 and when they left Motown and Berry Gordy was like, I'm keeping the name. And they're like, okay, well, we'll just be the Jacksons. Like they just shifted over to the Jacksons. They were still getting hits and everything. I mean, things were a bit different because they were older. And so, you couldn't really pull in the teeny bopper 13-year-old crowd because now these are grown men. But again, like even with the Jacksons, shifting from the Jackson 5 to the Jacksons, not much change. They ended up going on some very large, massive arena and stadium tours later down the line. And I think with the trademarking issue, like it makes me think of En Vogue as well, where you had the original four members. You had Terry, Don, Cindy, Maxine. And so in 97, Don leaves the group. And then in 2001, Maxine leaves the group. And then around 2010, everybody gets back together. We're all sisterhood. Yay, woo, let's go on tour. And then they start fighting a little bit more. Fast forward to 2013, they done split again. And it's Terry and Cindy, and then it's Don and Maxine. And now you have two En Vogues going on tours. But Terry and Cindy are like, wait a minute. We never left En Vogue, so we should have the rights to the name because you all kept leaving. And so they go into a whole lawsuit. Terry and Cindy actually win the lawsuit, and Don and Maxine have to kind of use another name. But you see that all the time with trademarks. It's the conversation with branding, because trademarks are pretty much how a lot of artists make their money when it comes to merchandise and T-shirts and everything like that. And even logos, or even, again, just the names when you're trying to release an album. It's very difficult if you are not the more established artist to have a similar name to somebody else and release an album. Like, as somebody who's put out 2 albums, when you're trying to get your stuff released on Tidal or iTunes or Spotify or Amazon or whatever, like if you have the same name as somebody else, there's a whole lot of hoops and hurdles you got to go through. Fortunately, there's not really any other Calvin Michaels out there. There's another Calvin Michaels, but they don't do music. They do film or something like that. But again, so I think with Lady Antebellum, it's like the optics. Like, y'all, I understand, like, they want to keep the peace, but even by you attempting to keep the peace, your actions have played a role into pretty much disenfranchising somebody else who's worked very hard. And clearly, like, the way that the industry's set up, like, the industry has been much more fair to Lady Antebellum than to Lady A. So it's like, let her have her name. You know what I mean? And I think that's, again, a conversation when you talk about allies. Sometimes I think people don't really listen. I'll always remember, there was this YouTube video that was out once. I don't know who posted it, but it's this video of this older white woman who's probably 90, right? And so she's singing this song, Run Nigga Run, Run Run Nigga Run. And like, she's laughing while she's singing it. And the person who posted the video was like, I'm posting this video, and mind you, this is like 10 years ago. I'm posting this video because it shows how far we've come, and now we can look back and we can laugh. And so anybody who gets offended, I'm just gonna block. And so everybody, of course, is like, what kind of foolery is this? And so people are like chewing out whoever posted the video, and they're arguing back to people saying like, no, you don't understand. Look how far we've come. This is just showing how ignorant people used to be, but we're not like that anymore. And so they did all that. Fast forward 10 years, where are we now in 2020? It was like, see, you weren't listening. Like, when folks are saying that there are certain problems that exist, they're still here. Just because you think they don't exist does not mean that that's the case, especially if you're looking at the world through a lens where you never had to look through that lens and consider that kind of viewpoint anyway to begin with. So I think with Lady Antebellum, it's like optics. Do better. You know, let Lady A have her stuff. Y'all can change your name to anything. Nobody's going to jump ship if the music is good. But now you're tarnishing your brand, because it's like, you know, you're getting into a battle with an artist who pretty much built their own career from the ground up and did not have the support of a major label to back them. Like, it's jacked up. Speaking of trifling people, then we have Betsy D, Secretary of Education. And so I don't know if you all saw the interview that happened on CNN earlier today, but again, Betsy is the prime example of when mediocrity and privilege have a baby. Because my goodness, like, one, it's already evident that she really just doesn't know what she's doing. And one of the things that I've seen with this administration is that they literally just put anybody in any position. As long as you were a friend of somebody, you get to have a cabinet position. And so you have all these people who are in these positions that have nothing to do with what their background is in. It has nothing to do with their experience. It has nothing to do with their expertise. And so now you're seeing the faults and the flaws with that kind of operation, when you have so many people in positions of power, but they're not really equipped to actually handle the qualms that come with that position. And so Betsy is the perfect example. It was very just, to sit and have to watch that crap this morning. And so, you know, they keep asking her all these questions because pretty much Betsy is saying all the schools need to open in the fall. And for some school districts, that's as early as 3 weeks from now. And she's saying, you know, all the schools need to open, and there's a possibility that for states and school districts that don't participate, they will cut federal funding. Now, when we talk about the funding for school, 90% of the funding is actually on a state level. It's coming out of the property taxes. It's coming out of regional revenue from those taxes. And then the other, sometimes 7 to 10%, normally comes from the federal level. And so a lot of people are saying, like, it's just not feasible to have all of these schools in America open at full capacity 5 days a week. It's just not feasible. And Betsy just kept pretty much saying the same talking point. Her bit was, the schools need to be open. Kids need to be in school. School needs to be open. Kids need to be in school. And it's kind of like, we all know that, but the problem is you all aren't giving a safe way for that to happen. You're also not giving the resources and the funding to make sure that that happens, because you're always trying to cut and chop down something every 5 minutes anyway. Like with somebody like Betsy, I already knew she was trash the minute that they decided they were going to gut and defund all of the Special Olympics. I was like, there is a special place and you know where for a person like that. Like, it's one thing if you were saying, oh, well, we need to cut 5% from the Special Olympics. It was like, no, we're going to cut everything. Let's just gut it. So I knew right then and there that she was not about the children. That's why when she kept saying, oh, the kids have to be in school, they have to learn, I was like, you're full of crap, because one, you don't care about the kids. So save it. Like, you're trying to latch on to pretty much the emotional appeals of those who are kind of iffy on the subject and trying to win them over that way. It doesn't work that way. You're full of crap. And I think in reality, it's so unfair to not just the kids, because again, it's like, we talked about this a few minutes ago, but like kids having to be collateral to the decisions of adults, but it's also not fair to teachers. And when you're looking at the numbers, when you're looking at just everything, it's not safe to open all of these schools at full capacity at the moment, especially now that you have numbers surging everywhere. And the worst thing that she said was this line where she was like, well, you know, I think only 0.2% of the kids will die, which I think was about 14,000 kids in total. I'm like, the fact that you're going to make America's children disposable because y'all need to open. Like, the real conversation is this has nothing to do with wanting the kids to learn. It's just about the economy. They recognize that if you can get all the kids back into school, The parents can be a bit more flexible with the work schedules and so on and so forth. The working class can get back to work, keep the rich folks rich. That's really what that's about. Because somebody like a Betsy and some of these other politicians, first of all, none of their children have ever been in anybody's public school to begin with. Secondly, somebody like Betsy never went to public school. She always went to these little rich private academies and everything because she grew up rich. She grew up in a family of billionaires. So this is not her experience. This is not her life. But a lot of these politicians and public figures who are so gung-ho about opening the schools, their kids will not be at these schools. Their kids are going to these private academies and everything, where some of those academies are not going to be open when all of this goes down. They'll still be doing everything virtually. So it's not going to affect their kids. It's going to affect your kids. It's going to affect our kids. And they don't care because, again, they don't see the value in human life. At the end of the day, in the United States, capitalism is king. So if people got to die so that the capitalism and the system and the money can keep circulating, then so be it. You've heard that come from so many people, even regular everyday people who are under the false pretense and false idea that they are wealthy. You've seen so many people say, oh, well, people are going to die. That's just how life is. So let's just go ahead and open the hair salon. Let's open the nail place. People die all the time. What's the big deal? That's kind of where we're at. And it's just so disturbing. And I feel bad for those who have children in school districts that don't have the same wealth as a Fairfax County public schools. You know what I mean? I just think it sucks. And so the fact that you're willing to pretty much throw all the teachers and the kids on the line, all in the name of the economy, I think that's some BS. And we wouldn't be in this situation if the United States just actually took care of the people. What could have happened, what would have made sense in all of this was like, if the United States would have just taken care of the people for the last 4 or 5 months, give everybody some kind of compensation, especially for the people who are out of work. Because, there's been so many who've lost their jobs and everything like that. 1 in 3 people could not make their rent this past month, as far as June. 1 in 3 people could not make the rent, could not make the mortgage. Like, America is hurting. Folks are struggling. And you pretty much have seen that the only people who are doing well are the wealthy. The stock market is doing well. You watch the Federal Reserve pump trillions into the stock market. And I'm like, that kind of money right there should have been something that would have gone to making sure like education and everything else would be okay. And that the everyday average working person who may have lost their job, or even people who are furloughed, or even people who just, they're piecing it together however they can, that all of those people were together. If you really cared about the economy, you'd make sure that the people who are the economy were well off. But again, it's a conversation of making sure that the top stays super, super rich, and it's the hell with everybody else. And that's the jacked up aspect about all of it. And so it's just like, man, because even when you're talking about education, I was not buying all of her, oh, the kids have to learn, it's so important for them. No, because you're part of the same administration that has cut the education budget for every year that they've been in power. 2017, cut the education budget. 2018, cut the education budget. 2019, cut the education budget. 2020, all right, we won't cut it the same way, but this time we're going to pull money from the college students and take it out of Pell Grants and everything else. So you're still cutting the education budget. But then you want to sit here and pretend all of a sudden you are so just passionate about the kids learning and so on and so forth. You don't care about none of that. You don't. Like, y'all aren't putting any money into the infrastructure of these schools. Like, again, the United States already only spends about 6% on education. It's closer to like 5% now because they've been just cutting so much over time. But you see what priorities are. Like, she really is like Effie Trinket from Hunger Games. Like, she's just out there just doing any and everything just because she can. And I think that's what happens when you have people who are just, they're not fit for the positions that they're in. To me, she's just never lived in the real world, and she also does not care. And so what she does is she hides behind a smile and hides behind trying to be very poised and everything, but she's full of crap. She doesn't know what she's doing. She can't answer the questions. And that was the other aspect. The question kept saying, well, what happens if there's an outbreak? How do they respond? Then all of a sudden it's up to the schools, and I know that they can do it. That's not their job to figure out how to respond to a pandemic. But again, when you've cut all of these different agencies, and this is above her too, because this is also the current president and everybody else in these cabinets, when you've cut so much funding from all of these different agencies that actually deal with issues that pertain to the public on a macro scale, this is what we get. And so now all of a sudden teachers are going to have to be nurses and doctors. The classrooms, if you're talking about separating children 6 feet apart, how do you do that with kindergartners? How do you do that with first graders? How do you do that with second graders? How do you keep kids with masks on all day? How do they do that? It's not really a thing. Even as somebody who runs a community center, I just think about the fact that, a lot of these teachers are going to end up getting sick from their children. And a lot of these teachers are also older. And I think of the fact that there's at least 2 or 3 videos I've made in the past where I'm on here, I'm like, hey y'all, one of my kids made me sick, so bear with me. That's the reality. Like, younger kids, especially like 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, when it comes to proximity and distancing and everything, that's not something they really understand yet. And don't let them want to tell you a secret or something. They have the hottest, wettest whisper in the world. Mr. Michael, I have to tell you something. Bang, bang, mom said that tomorrow I'm gonna bring cupcakes for my birthday. I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean? And then on top of that, like for me in the after school realm, you know how many times kids still go to school sick? How many times kids go to their after school program sick because mom or dad can't take off work or so on and so forth? Like, that's the reality. There's a whole bunch of times where I'm at work like 3 hours before the kids are even going to be there, and there's a kid that pops in the center, and I'm like, what are you doing here? I'm sick. Well, what you doing here? Well, my mom went to the store, so she said I have to stay here till she gets back. And the mom don't come back for 3 hours. I'm like, you know what? Just sit over there, don't touch nothing. Like, that's the reality. So I think they have to be realistic. Y'all are treating these teachers like crap. I think every school district, school board, teachers, y'all need to go on strike. Like, because in all reality, again, there's a lot going on. I'm just over it. I'm really over it. Like, when I look at how the United States responded to COVID and how the rest of the world is starting to find their new lane of normalcy and things are getting better in other countries, but the United States, it's like we just hit the rewind button and we're back to how we were in March. It's just triggering. And now you want to open schools as if things have gotten better. This stuff is not going anywhere. It's like you literally are trying to kill people for real. Like, come on. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want to sound petty, but I'm like, you know, somebody give COVID to everybody in the cabinet. Let them have it for a few weeks. Let them live through it, and then let them make some legislation in after they've had to live through it. And that's how I feel. Like, I'm over it. It's just like, who are these people that are in charge? I can't wait for the flush. I can't wait for all of these people to be up out of there. For somebody who was claiming to drain the swamp, he done put all the corrupt people in charge of everything. Goodness. That would be like if the Screen Actors Guild decided that I was going to be in charge just because I had a YouTube channel. Well, you know, he sits in front of a camera. He can handle the Screen Actors Guild. Put him over it. That's literally what this cabinet looks like. Just, you got a brain surgeon over HUD. Why? Moving on. So the last two things I did want to talk about, there were two cases I briefly wanted to touch on. They're going to reopen the investigation into the death of Tamla Horsford. If you remember, back in 2018, she was a woman who was at an adult sleepover, black woman, at an adult sleepover in Forsyth County, Georgia. And somehow she mysteriously died. She was found face down in the yard. People think she fell off the balcony. And so there were lots of questions around her death. And some people thought it was a cover-up and felt that it may have been a homicide, even though it was ruled an accident. Now, the reason that this is somewhat relevant is because this is also the same county that was once featured on the Oprah show, because it pretty much was a sundown town. At the time that the Oprah episode aired, it was like 86, 87. There hadn't been a black resident in that town for 75 years. And it was one of the towns that were pretty much a very racist area. Like, you know, no blacks allowed, don't come in here. They want to keep a white only kind of thing. And so I don't really know how the demographics operate with Forsyth County now, but that's one of the things that kind of came off as a red flag for a lot of people. And she also was the only black person at the party. So there's just a lot of questions. She was a mother of 5. And so they were trying to investigate. And they were saying, okay, well, there was marijuana and alcohol in her system. And yeah, she might have just been high and drunk and fell off the balcony. But the other issue is that no one also claims to have seen her fall or seen how she died. And so there's lots of questions around that case. So it'll be interesting to see what comes up with it. It'll be interesting to see like what is revealed. But, you know, sometimes the investigation's the crap too. So there's that. And I think the other thing I did want to talk about, which sucks, is, you know, they're closing the lid on the Kendrick Johnson case. It's pretty much a wrap at this point. There's not going to be any further investigations. And if you remember, Kendrick Johnson is a student that mysteriously died in the school, in the wrestling mat. He was somehow found in the wrestling mat. And then even when the parents went and got the second independent autopsy, that's when they discovered that he had no organs and his body was stuffed with newspapers. And so there was camera footage that was available, but that camera footage has all disappeared and it looked edited as far as what was released. And there's lots of questions. People do feel that there was another student at the school who may have hit him with a barbell and actually killed him. And then there may be a conversation. Maybe they just, you know, tried to hide him inside the wrestling mat. Who knows? But the sad part is now the case is closed. They're not going to really investigate it anymore. And I think that totally sucks because for the parents, they're not getting answers. And I think with that case, there's too many questionable things. One, again, the fact that he's dead is the biggest issue as far as him dying, but the questions surrounding his death. But then again, why is it that his body doesn't have any organs? Why is he stuffed with newspapers? You know what I mean? And so some things to think about. I just think, you know, there's so much foolery and corruption that happens. It's like story after story after story. It's just wild, but we'll kind of see how that unfolds. I think with Kendrick Johnson's situation, I do think there's a way around them closing that. I think I feel like there's going to be something on a more federal level that comes later down the line. So I do think people should still be active in challenging what has been kind of put out there and what has been laid down as law. And so that's pretty much all I have for you guys. I think we're going live this week. I'm not 100% sure, but if I'm 100% sure, when I get sure, I will make an announcement on the community page. That's pretty much it. So yeah, I will catch up with you. Until next time, I'm out. Subscribe.
I can read her face. He's taking her everything. He's taking her everything. She's in doubt while she sleeps. All the hurt, the defeat. 'Cause it's over. 'Cause it's over. Now she's getting her stuff in, getting her stuff in, getting it, he can't save her. Now she's getting her stuff in, getting her stuff in, getting it, he can't save her. What you gonna do? It gets so rough. What you gonna do? When you had too much. What you gonna do? When it's not enough. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? When you hurt your lies and you got your size. You try. What you gonna do? What you gonna do? She's crying.